Hey guys, Joey Shanks here once again, and this is part 2 of our 35mm Filmmaker's Guide series. Now we have our Konvas 1M, and in part 1 we learned the basics of the camera. But in part 2, we're going to be dealing with a lot of troubleshooting issues that are going to come up when you order these cameras. Even if it says it's in perfect condition, you're still not quite sure what problems are going to arise. So let's get a little more in depth into the Konvas 1M camera. Now, if you don't have 3 lenses to fill up the entire turret, you're going to need to block these guys here so light doesn't leak in. What I found to be a good fit were actually these pipe ends, PVC pipe ends, like this, and they fit perfectly on here. These kind of cameras are made in the late 50s, early 60s, and those lenses that fit inside this camera, you're gonna have to purchase them in Russia or from parts of Eastern Europe. Now, these Russian lenses have a very simple design for how they slide into the camera. And you're not gonna find many lenses that are as narrow as these particular lenses. Now, there are ways to adapt other lenses to fit this Oct-18 mount. So we need to be on the lookout for lenses that fit into an M42 threaded mount, where the lens simply screws into the mount, and that will be able to slide inside the Oct-18 mount. And if you're lucky, sometimes these lenses will be so deep in the back, you may just need to put a strip of gaffer's tape on them and they will fit nice and snugly. So this is an FD mount right here. It looks like this lens could be a possibility, but as you can see when I try to put it in, just not going in, right there. Now, one of the main lenses I'm going to show you guys how to use is a Helios Russian lens. Now, this does have a Pentax mount, which is very convenient. It produces some really cool bokeh photography and a really interesting warping pattern for things in the background. Very narrow, the connection here, and it's also somewhat deep, where it's going to fit nicely into our Konvas. The Helios has a really interesting option where you can turn this top ring here and you can set an aperture limit. So if you know that you need to be at a f11 here, then you can just open it up while you're focusing, and then when you're ready to film, you just close it. It won't go further than f11, like that. But we're gonna have to do a few things to this lens to get it to work properly. So there's 2 glass elements. There's one right here at the top, this other one at the bottom. So the only bad thing is that this glass element needs to be closer to the film gate, because I just wasn't able to get really anything in focus. Now I could get some stuff maybe between here and like maybe 3 feet. So it was like serving as a macro lens. I needed to get this guy, the glass right here, closer. I took out this glass piece. A lot of these older lenses have these indentions right here. See them? And sometimes it may be really tough to get these out if, you know, they're old and corroded. But just me kind of pushing on it, able to get it out and see it's turning. All right, so 3 elements in a box and put it away because we don't need it right now. I put that thicker black ring back in. I'll put this 50mm element that I got out of another lens. This is an old Konica 57mm lens. So I just unscrewed all this stuff and I eventually got to the point where I was able to get this lens piece out. And what you can do is tape this down with gaffer's tape just to see if it works well. And if you find out that it's a good fit and you're getting a good exposure, you can then do hot glue to make it a little bit more permanent. And even just putting a little bit of gaffer's tape around the outer ring here to get this lens to stick in nice and snug. Still want to be careful with this. There's always the possibility that this thing could pop off. And a lot of times these lenses with the M42 mount, they're not going to be as deep as the Helios. I recommend getting the same kind of PVC piping I was talking about and using a Dremel to edge out the inner core of it so you make it just a smidge wider, and then that should fit nicely on this M42 threading. And your PVC pipe really only needs to be about a 1/2 inch in length. keep in mind that you're still going to have to change that glass element and bring it further up, closer to the film gate. There's a few different Helios lenses. Now, I purchased two. I got this one on eBay, and I got it for a really cheap price because in the description it said that the aperture wasn't working. As you can see, when I turn the aperture ring, nothing happens. But if I push this guy down right here, it works just fine. So we're gonna put a tiny washer underneath this lens element here to keep this guy down. So we're gonna unscrew these 4 screws to start with. Now, what I like to do is just use some yellow tape, and I'm gonna just put some yellow tape right here, just to help us line it up when we get this part off. Okay, so with those off, we're just gonna take this guy out. As you can see, there's this little pin here. So we want to cut the tiniest spacer you can imagine, 2 centimeters. Just get a pen that you don't really use and pop it off and get this plastic element out. Pinch it a little bit, just so it is kind of stuck and it doesn't slide off. So we're gonna push it in here. As you can see, it's not coming up above, it's just staying nice and flush. Make sure the screws are aligned and keep the pressure tight just so that pin doesn't pop out for any reason. Now, it's not as smooth as the other Helios lens, but like I said, you can get these fairly inexpensive, and especially when the owner doesn't think that this aperture can be fixed, you can get them dirt cheap. Just make sure it's 36 exposures, and you'll probably get 20 to 25 frames. So if you just do the hand crank, you could take a few pictures just to make sure your exposure is working properly and you're taking the proper light meter. And that's what I did. So I took my Doctor Strange action figure from the previous episode we did, and I just took a couple sample images, and they turned out pretty good. Obviously, the image is going to be a little blurry just because the hand crank is not that smooth. The test is just to see that everything's working properly and you're getting an acceptable image. Now, obviously, you're going to need to get good at rolling this in the dark, loading your camera up. Take your roll here, and you go ahead and you cut your nice little point here. After this part, you're going to probably have to go to the dark. And I used my secondary shed for my dark room, and I boarded up the windows, and what I would do is bring scissors, tape, and 2 black bags for the film to sit in once I was done with it. But let's say we were in the dark, okay? Pop off the top here, this ring out, and just pull it with some pliers, and there we go. And we cut that in the light, so that makes it a little bit easier for us. We would then just roll it up. And you also might want to bring a clip like this right here, just while you're in the dark. So you can just clip it on here for now, just so it stays in place. So you can give this a snip. And remember to give it a point as well. Oh, see, that almost went in there. You would then load it like we would do a normal roll of film. And even if you were like questioning whether you had it right from this point, you could always put this back on the top here and maybe not go into a lot of light, but you could go maybe turn a small light on just to make sure that everything looked good from this point. This one's a little tricky just because it's so bent. Like taking this and kind of bending it a little bit. And as you can see from here, we have about 24 frames to work with. Now, I know it's not much, but it is better than nothing. Just so you can frame up a shot and just crank it real quick just to see what it looks like, to see if your focus is right. A lot of times your local photography film developing place usually can get this done in a day, 2 days tops. Even if you take it in the morning, there's a very good chance you could get it back that afternoon. Thanks again for checking out part 2 of our 35mm Filmmaker's Guide series. Now in part 3, we're going to be going over how to power your camera without using the hand crank, where you can actually shoot at a higher frame rate and keep the image a little steadier. Now that's gonna involve a 6-volt battery and a custom rushing cord. And finally, to cap everything off, we're gonna shoot Christmas morning with my little girl Hannah opening up presents on 3 different formats: Super 8, 16mm, and 35mm. And I think it's gonna serve as a really nice template to see the different looks of 3 different formats. And also, if you guys want a little taste of what the 16mm format looks like, I finally got the footage back from Halloween, and I'm gonna provide a link at the bottom so you guys can check that out. Thanks again for watching, and we will see you next time. Later.